Hi, welcome to wilsonliling.com. If you really like or you've been blessed by this leadership podcast and making a big difference for you, we would love to hear from you. We'd love to hear your thoughts about it. And if you have some testimony you could share about it, that would really be a blessing to us. Right now, I want to talk about passing it on effectively. Now, I want to talk about its importance. You see, as leaders, it is so crucial for us to learn how to pass on what is essential to our team and to our followers. If we are to build a group that is going to move together, it is crucial that we have those essentials being passed on in an appropriate way to every person, and in the most appropriate way and at the most appropriate times. Now, you are part of that chain to ensure this occurs effectively and efficiently. Whether you are at the top of the chain or when you are part of the leadership chain, whichever way, you need to know how to pass it on effectively. Now, think about an army of soldiers in the battlefield. The army commander, they need to communicate effectively to all his forces on the ground, perhaps about the tactical steps that they need to take as the battle is progressing. Maybe there are a whole range of units in there that need to understand what's the appropriate action that they should be taking at that point in time, perhaps sometimes instantly, in a way that their communication needs to be able to synergize throughout their army, all their soldiers. They need to be able to talk and relate in ways that they can understand. They need to be able to communicate so that when one unit is launching an attack, the other units are in place instead of still trying to get ready. So you really want all the soldiers in the units to be able to operate in a way that's interchangeable. In other words, they can switch the soldiers around and yet still being able to work together so that they can share weapons, the support, and so forth. That's what you want in the army that's going to function effectively in the battlefield. So if you are a key senior leader, it's even more crucial that you understand how you can work through such things effectively and develop it and maintain it even. In fact, the bigger the group you lead, the more crucial this becomes. You see, when the group is small, everyone can hear and see you on a regular basis. And so as a result, you do not need to be too concerned about how you pass things on. But the larger the group, the more crucial this becomes, because you will find there are actually more obstacles along the way. So let's talk about what to pass on. What are some of the key elements that ought to be passed on in your leadership chain into the rest of the group or the team? First one is vision. What is vision? It is a clear mental image of a preferred future, preferably imparted by God. Vision is really focused on the future. It is not about having more of the past or maintaining the status quo. It is about creating a better tomorrow in which the purposes of God are brought to pass through God's empowerment and guidance. So vision is needed because it gives direction, but in such a way that's infused with faith, with hope. Without vision, the group will begin to fragment and people will begin to go off into different directions. Without vision, the group may not move forward strongly together. So while the group as a whole, they need to have a clear vision, it is also equally important that any subgroups, they should have the appropriate subvision. Those subvisions should really align and complement the main vision. So for example, in Hope Church, we have a community arm, which we call Hands of Hope. And we had to make sure that the vision that's in there complements our church vision, that it does not run counter to or is separate from our church main vision. It had to be part of it all. The second area is values. because values, it articulates what really matters to us. Our values make us what we are and helps us grow into what we aspire to be. So it is usually our true values that undergird the type of decisions that we make. We should note that there can be a big difference between the values that we say we have and the values that we actually have, those values that we're actually acting upon. Amos chapter 3, verse 3 has this to say, "Do two walk together unless they've agreed to do so?" But what we need to understand is this: we can agree, but at different levels. We can agree at the values level, and it is in fact the most fundamental level of agreement. You see, when we share the same values, then together we can unite and move powerfully. We can begin to achieve greater things in God. So really, the heartbeat of a movement is contained in its core values. And that is why in the Hope International Ministries, we have made clear our 10 core values. When there is a difference in value within the group, eventually it will come out. If those values are fundamental, it can create discord, it can create tension. See, two persons can have different values and still go in the same direction. But when there's a problem, when there's a crisis, then the differences in those values will often come out to the fore, to the front, and split the partnership. And this can happen in marriage, business partners, in churches, and so forth. So let me give you an example. Imagine that there are two men who agree to establish a startup for a cyber business that seeks to empower other businesses. They agree on the product, they agree on the marketing approach, they agree on the product development, the type of stuff, but one values making money as the top priority, while the other values in helping others succeed in business. Do you think they're going to succeed together over the long haul with those two quite different values? It's going to be tough. So for a group to really journey together in the long haul, it is critical to share the same values. Otherwise, we are kidding ourselves. Whenever there are tough times, a crisis, instead of sticking together, it often begins to fragment. So the values are so important. The third thing I want to mention is about culture. What is culture? Culture is the observed values and behaviors common to a group of people. It is not what they say so much, but what they do. So such cultures, it comes about because it really reflects the attitudes, the values, the philosophies within the group. And it has been modeled to some extent, to a good enough extent that it has now become the norm. And because we normally interact at the level of behaviors, this is a crucial element. You see, some of us can interact at the level of ideas or interests and so forth, but mostly we interact at the level of our behaviors. And so, when the cultures match, when they align or when they fit in with one another, it becomes smooth sailing. Because a lot of the frictions coming from differences in the way we interact, it has been reduced. Why? Because we share the same culture. So if we can nurture a similar culture, then you're going to have teams and groups that can work well together. If especially you have a good, healthy culture, then often the groups will begin to thrive, because whoever joins in and emulate, follow those similar behaviors is going to bring about healthy things in the group. So cultures are powerful because it is the first thing that people pick up on and they follow. And so you see, it's quite natural for most people because they want to fit in socially. So they pick up the social clues. What's the norm here to behave? So if they enter into a healthy culture, they will also emulate a healthy culture. They will begin to behave in healthy ways, which will then, of course, be good for them and the group. Now, the fourth area that we need to pass on is doctrines. What are doctrines? Doctrines are a set of beliefs or principles taught by a group, such as within a church. It is the basis to understand many things that they do. So doctrines are important because it can become a framework within which we develop our values and our practices. For example, we hold to the doctrine that the baptism of the Holy Spirit is a distinct subsequent experience from salvation. And that is why we help people to be baptized in the Holy Spirit. So depending on how fundamental some specific doctrines are and how important they may be to an individual, it can have a significant impact on how some are able to work together or not. Now, some people are able to adapt enough. There are others who are not able to adapt to such differences. So it is usually easier for a group to work together if they do hold similar doctrines in key areas. Otherwise, it can cause uneasiness because they're saying, hey, we're not quite believing the same things. It can cause frustrations to build up. So this is why it's important to pass on what we believe in doctrines. Let me go on. The fifth aspect I want to mention is communications. You see, what is most crucial on a daily basis for a group in order that they may function together is good, effective communication. Communication is needed so that you can pass on directions, policies, ideas, events, changes, so forth. And so communication is effective when it is mostly relevant, when it's appropriate, when it's timely. Communication breakdown can occur when any of these ingredients are not met. And often one major contributor to failure to pass on the right information is supposed to go to the right people in the right way. What is it? Have you heard of Chinese whispers? Well, information get gobbled after passing on through many hands. Poor communication can cause a lot of issues in the group. Frustrations, misunderstandings can develop. It can weaken motivations and timeliness of actions. So the bigger the group is, the more crucial effective communication becomes. So how can we do this? How can we effectively pass it on? Now, there are a variety of avenues that are available to you in order to pass this on, but you need to identify the most appropriate avenues to impart. And each avenue, it has its strengths, it has its weaknesses. You have to be strategic in how you utilize those avenues to communicate. Let me list a number of key ones. The first one is through teaching and preaching. See, when teaching or preaching is done well, it is excellent for making clear concepts, and even it is possible to impart some of your convictions. And it is a great way for telling things, but it is weak for demonstrating. It is great for imparting vision when you are a good communicator. It is good for imparting knowledge and doctrines with good teachers. It is, however, weak for cultures because cultures is more effectively experienced. And when you're not the top leader, your personal challenge is to actually capture the vision, the values, the culture, make it your own, and then begin to communicate it through those teaching and preaching opportunities to the rest of your group. So, a second key area is exemplifying. What do I mean by that? Well, I'm talking about your example, the way you live your life, the way you go about doing ministry. Our examples are great for showing, but it's weak in terms of depth and breadth because you cannot communicate as much through the way you do things. You see, people often see the external, but they may not understand the reasons why, the values behind it, just because you are demonstrating it through how you do things. Unless we are also intentional to teach about it so that we may complement our example. Our example can be powerful means to impart values. While values can be taught, it is best caught. That's why mentoring is such a powerful way to impart values, because there's close proximity. They can actually see it. They can actually see how you live out, why you make those decisions, especially when you explain it, explaining why. So it is a great way to impart culture, because remember, culture is mostly lived out in the area of behavior. And of course, culture becomes the more powerful when the majority of the group function with the same culture. And so the key, it starts with how well we internalize it and then begin to live it out. Let me go on. A third key in dealing with those areas is documenting. Media can be a very effective means to communicate when it's used appropriately and strategically. You see, for example, the written media is best for precision, and because the words can best capture the thoughts. Of course, it can include some graphic means as well. But, for example, that's why in scientific research is almost always written, because it can capture the ideas so well. And also, the whole discipline of writing, it brings out a greater clarity in your thinking, which will aid a lot in the overall communication as time goes by. For another area is using audio video, just like our podcast here today. It's far better for moving people's hearts, because you can capture the emotion, the energy, the intensity. It can convey the conviction, it can convey the urgency, it can convey the passion in more vivid ways. Documenting has the benefit of longevity and reproducibility. And so it can ensure that a given standard in quality is maintained and passed on through the generations if it is done well. And so when you document this way, it is a critical means of doing things. It minimizes the dilution that could occur over several generations. But it's one of the reasons why we are documenting. We're documenting a lot of our teaching now in our church and even in our movement. Let me mention about communication channels. There are numerous tools for communication today. There are different types for different purposes. What we must do is become wise to pick up the most appropriate tools that we can use. And so what are some of these channels? It could be in person, talking, sharing with people. It could also mean us using social media because it provides a very general mass communication where you communicate little bits like through Facebook, Instagram, and so forth. You can communicate to many people, quick things, but not a lot. Messaging tools you could use as well, which is like WhatsApp, which you could target. It's very targeted to certain groups or individuals that you want to communicate with, and you can have back and fro communication at the same time. You could, of course, use emails. Emails are very useful when you want to send much bigger documents and so forth, or you want to be able to search for it easily. Often now you have different things like Outlook, which enables you to search all the various emails that's there. You could also use team tools for collaboration, and you have things like Slack or Team, where you can communicate and send things back and forth and retain it, and it's all designed for teamwork. You can have teleconferencing tools like Zoom, Skype, Google Meet, and so forth. So there are many different ways to communicate, but you got to find the best solution for your context, for the type of people that we have. And so if you could use these communication tools effectively, especially many of these digital means, you can reduce the load of communication down your chain. They don't have to keep passing it on because you have now tools to jump across, to touch key elements, key levels, key parts of the chain. And that will help you minimize distortion, will help you speed things up. It will also help you reduce the unnecessary communication load upon your leaders so that they can focus on the more important things. Let me now just mention some challenges. Some of the challenges in seeking to pass it on effectively. Well, for the first one I want to mention is the challenge of keeping it front of mind. What do I mean by this? You see, when we pass something on, we cannot assume that it's going to remain in the front of people's minds. There's so much communication happening today in life and ministry, and it's all occurring at such a fast pace today. So people forget, or they get distracted, or it's just pushed back on their priority list. So we cannot simply pass something on and forget. We need to be aware of what is important to keep front of mind. It's the most important things are vision, values, culture, things like this. We need to keep reminding the people. And the thing is this, when we know it well enough ourselves, then we can actually begin to detect when our people are veering off the vision, the values, the culture. And so if we can keep our ears and keep our senses close to the ground, it's going to help us detect when some of these key aspects have begun to cool down. Then we may have to heat it up again. We may need to communicate, give it greater emphasis again, so that we heat up those values, we heat up that culture once again. The second challenge is the challenge of subgroups. And when I talk about subgroups, it could be your different departments, different demographic groups within your church or organization. And in those groups, it may be appropriate to have a subgroup vision, as I mentioned earlier. But we must make sure it captures the focus or the direction that is relevant to the group. But we must make sure that vision complements and is aligned with the overall vision. Because sometimes people can become too focused on the vision of the subgroup and begin to neglect the larger vision. And not only that, certain values and cultures within the subgroup can take its own life because of the leaders they are in there. So what can we do? Let me now offer some recommendations. As the leader, you should take the opportunity to invite your senior leaders to come into your group so that they may observe and feel the cultures and the values that's operating in the group, so that they can help adjust, or maybe they could reinforce certain cultures and values. And as leaders, it is also helpful for us perhaps to move around to visit some of the other groups in your organization so that you can experience their culture, their values. For all you know, it could inspire us. It could provide also a check, as perhaps we may have gone off track a little bit and we can suddenly notice, oh, this is what they are emphasizing and I haven't emphasized this for a long time. It can also be a wonderful way when we're intentional, so that by us going or sending our people to some select groups which are really strong in certain cultures or certain values, we could send our people there to catch it and bring it back into our own group. So these are some of the things we can do. Now the third and last challenge I want to mention is the challenge of longevity. If you really desire longevity for the vision, for the values, for the culture, then we really need to think through more thoroughly. How can we build for longevity? So, because think about this, any aspect that gets lukewarm, then we can begin to be strategic to heat it up again so that it will continue to keep going on. And that is why documenting is such a crucial part of the overall strategy, because it helps set a certain benchmark that people have documented. They now know this is what it should be. And that's why it's also important that we continue to repeat ourselves, although in creative ways, in different ways, to repeat what is important, to highlight again what is the vision, what is the mission, what's the value, what's the culture. You can do this through your sermons, your teaching, do different communications that you do. But be creative in the way you go about doing it. That is why in Hope Church, for example, we have an in-house equipping track that's called Next Steps Academy. And we actually have subjects like core values. We have subjects like doctrines. So we teach that and we continue to teach that. And we also try to slip it into some other subjects. For example, we have subjects like knowing God's will. where we use that to impart certain values. Classes like the Heart of Mentoring, which is training our people on mentoring. So we try to impart certain values through those training as well. So another aspect we can consider is to build into the calendar of your church so that you have regular means where you focus on imparting vision or talking about culture or doctrines. If you can build it into the life of the church on some regularity, that will help tremendously. It will help us not to forget about those key elements, but to continue to build it and to reinforce it into the life of the church. Now let me conclude by saying this. The passing on of vision, values, culture, it's the way we communicate is so crucial for the life of a larger and a growing group. We should really learn how to do it effectively, strategically, through every appropriate channel that we can utilize. We must be aware of the challenges that exist and be intentional to minimize the problems that can be created. So let's pass on what matters effectively in order that your group, your organization can move together, grow together, and function together effectively. May God bless you.
We trust you've been blessed by the word today. Do visit www.wilsonliling.com for more messages and teachings. For the latest news and updates, follow Facebook and Instagram wilson.liling.